Today, we're going to talk about chemical addiction. What exactly it is about, we'll go into that very shortly. Like I mentioned earlier on, these are very informative. These are more of letting you know kind of the backstory, the general idea. If you think this is not quite adequate and you do want a little bit more concrete things, more hands-on thing for you to be able to support either yourself or your loved one, coming up in November, Trina, one of the moderators for tonight, is going to take the lead in bringing forth for you 2 workshop series. There are 2-part series for each workshop. On the 9th and 11th, she will be actually holding a workshop on managing addictive behaviors in youth. And if the person that you're supporting is not a young person, but more of an adult, on the 23rd and 30th of November, she will also have another series of workshops looking at how do you get some hands-on skills and techniques to look at managing the addictive behaviors in adults. I hope that's going to be helpful for you. All right. So if you're interested in all these workshops, stay tuned. There'll be a registration link and you could actually sign up for all these workshops online. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to start off with, I'm going to cover a little bit on chemical addiction, what exactly that is about, to introduce you a little bit to what are the various stages of addiction. Thereafter, Gaia will take on the show to tell you a little bit more about what are the impacts of addiction on oneself as well as people around us. What are some of the treatment options available? And if you are actually supporting a loved one who might be struggling with this, what are the resources that you can tap on? All right. So maybe to get us started, I'm going to play a little video for you that gives a little bit of a glimpse. A word of caution, this video aims to help us introduce the idea that substance usage as well as addiction, they have a direct relationship with our brain reward system. I would have to qualify that this is a very simple video. It is not going to explain everything about drug usage, substance usage, but it does give a little bit of starting ground for us for the rest of our session. I would also like to take this opportunity to say that during this video, sometimes I get comments like, oh, so does it mean that we are excusing people who are using drugs? No, that's not the case. It is not an excuse to, it is not a reason for us to excuse substance usage, but that the usage for introducing this video is for us to see the power of substance on our brain structure and our brain chemical. Hopefully, that will allow us to have further conversations on how come sometimes when we talk about quitting substance usage, it is much easier said than done. Okay? So let's take a look at this video.
To understand why people drink and take drugs, we must first journey back to a time when staying alive was a challenge. Unbeknownst to our prehistoric cousins, their everyday survival depended on the actions of a brain system scientists now call the mesocorticolimbic dopamine reward pathway. Found deep within the center of the brain, this pathway is activated when we encounter new stimuli that are important for our survival. The end result is a feeling of enhanced well-being. For our ancient ancestors, this meant that venturing out into dangerous territory to find a source of food or a sexual mate would lead to a release of dopamine, making our caveman here feel very, very good. The experience of the rewarding stimulus would be encoded into regions of the brain involved in memory and planning, ensuring that our ancestors would continue to actively feed and procreate despite the many lurking perils of the time.
All right, that's the end of this very short video. Historically, prehistoric times, you will see that they said that the idea of taking risks, being able to fight war, being able to conquer has a lot to do with the reward system that our brain derived. So quite clearly, in today's context, we are no longer cavemen and cavewomen, but the need for survival and pleasure continues to dominate us in the modern days, translating the understanding that by nature, human beings strive to survive. There can be 4 broad categories that I would say people actually engage in when they use substance. There can be many reasons, but these are the broad 4 categories that research has found. The first key reasons that people tend to experience when they use drugs is a pleasurable feelings. People use drugs because it gives them a high feeling. It gives them a feel-good feeling. Okay. So second common reasons that we tend to see why people use substance is also whereby sometimes people use substance, be it alcohol or drug, because it brings forth a calming effect to them. You hear people how sometimes they actually use drugs to manage certain pain as a pain management coping mechanism. So drug has that function. Okay. For a third group of people, they do use substance to help them enhance their performance. So we hear a lot of all these things through athletes. You know, how we talk about substance tests for Olympic athletes. But if we think a little bit about it on a day-to-day life, right, it actually has a lot of relevance to us as well. I mean, I have to confess, I myself, I use caffeine a lot to manage my day-to-day survival. If I do not drink coffee for a day, you'll see me getting a little agey, you'll see me hard to focus. So to some extent, I have to say that I use substance as well. I use caffeine as a way of enhancing my ability to stay awake for the entire day. Okay. So people sometimes also use substance as a form of social bonding. Not necessarily for every single populations, but sometimes we do see that in certain social groups, they do actually engage in a lot of drug usage or alcohol usage as a way of mingling, as a way of being part of the in-group. So for certain individuals, for them to want to join the group, to be part of this particular group, they also engage in a common activity in this particular group, be it drinking or drug usage. Okay, so these are the 4 key types of how people usually first step into substance usage. Today, I will focus in on chemical addiction. So you can see that chemical addiction, predominantly just now I introduced the idea concept of alcohol, drugs. These are the 2 main key chemical because they do have an impact. Consuming these 2 broad category of materials has an impact on our brain structure. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So maybe at this opportunity, I just want to introduce you to the concept of addiction. What exactly is addiction? Do all people drink coffee like myself are addicted? Do every single drinker, social drinker, are they social drinker or are they alcohol addicts? So there is indeed some level of differentiation. For a very, very long time, there's this idea of dependency and addiction. I wouldn't go too technical into all these medical term, but what is important for us to recognize what makes a usage evolve into a dependency and addiction is this idea of withdrawal symptom. Whether if you do not consume this particular material, does it bring forth a withdrawal syndrome in you? And this withdrawal syndrome can be both physical or psychological in nature. Later on, I will also touch a little bit more about that. Yeah. So the key difference between dependency as well as addiction would be this whole idea of at prolonged usage, do you actually see yourself or your loved one having difficulty controlling your desire to use this product? There is a very, very strong urge. In fact, this urge can be so powerful that you don't find yourself being able to just call it quit. Going back to my example of coffee usage, yes, I would love to drink coffee every single day. I did mention that I do receive a little bit of withdrawal syndrome if I do not drink coffee for the day. But if you ask me truthfully, at least at this stage, if I were to be honest with all of you, if you ask me at this stage, would I find it impossible to stop drinking anything that has caffeine? Probably not. I would love to have it, but it's not impacting me at a psychological dependency stage where I am unable to stop the intake of caffeine. This is unfortunately not quite the case for people who might be struggling with addiction. For someone who has an addiction situation, they would find that stop taking substance is not something that they can willingly do. they find it very, very difficult. The urge is very, very strong. Later on, when I talk about how does substance abuse develop, hopefully that gives you a little bit more sensing. Why is it that he can't just stop? How come she would keep doing that despite knowing that it brings forth a lot of negative consequence? Because addiction has this very peculiar nature that this person has an impaired ability to control the urges any further. Okay. I hope that is something that gives you a glimpse what makes a usage cross the line to become an addiction. Those are the broad strokes. In the medical world, we do have a diagnostic nature. Not every single person who drinks alcohol, for example, like I mentioned, will be considered as having an addiction. In the medical world, we kind of call it the substance use disorder. It used to be called dependency and addiction, but since a couple of years ago, they have been broadly renamed to substance use disorder. We also classify people who have this disorder to 3 different tiers in general, whether it's mild, it's moderate, it's severe. So how does someone get diagnosed with substance use disorder? Layman term will call it addiction. Okay. Medically, we will have to actually kind of do some interview with this individual. If within a period of 12 months, the individual actually presents 3 or more of these following symptoms, this person might have met the criteria of substance use disorder. Impaired control. You can see that just now I did mention the difference between usage and addiction is where this person actually finds it very hard to say, I want to stop. This person finds that they have to spend a lot more time to control themselves. And in fact, sometimes the ability to control has been so difficult, the craving has been so strong that they no longer find themselves being able to just decide when to take it and when not to take it. Okay. So that's one very key characteristics that we tend to see in people who have an addiction issue. The second very common situation, as with many people who are grappling with addiction, there's a lot of impairment in their social life. And in this social life, I refer to, it could be school, it could be their workplace, it could be family life. Because of the addiction, they find it very hard to uphold the original roles and responsibility that they do have. Say, for example, perhaps as a husband, because of, say, alcohol intake, alcohol addiction situation, he might find it very hard to actually go to work. And because he has problem going to work, eventually the financial situations in the family gets impacted. It might lead to further arguments with the partner. The ability to meet the family financial demand might actually be reduced. So there might be a lot of neglecting of the roles and responsibility. Those are some of the impairment that we tend to see. So, for example, in young people, we could see that perhaps, say, for example, one of the common substance addictions that we tend to see in young people these days, unfortunately, has been substance usage. You could see that some young people, because of their substance usage, they have affected their family relationship with their parents, they have dropped out of school, etc. Okay, so that's on social impairment. Risky use. So they also need to qualify for potentially risky use. It can be physical or psychological problem. This is a situation whereby you could see that the usage of this substance has bring forth real actual impact, be it physically or psychologically. I do remember I was working with this lady. She has an addiction to alcohol, and what happened has been because of her alcohol intake, even though one could argue that she continues to go to work, she continues to function as an employee, but there has been a few times that she fainted at work and at home. And eventually the doctor also found that because of her alcohol intake, it has affected her health. She needs to go for some treatment, etc. So you could see that how a substance use could potentially bring forth a risk factor for this individual. In this case, this lady actually health has been significantly compromised because of the alcohol intake. And as with many addiction, one of the most common criteria that we tend to also use to gauge whether someone meets the criteria for addiction is that you tend to find this individual having a greater tolerance to the substance as time builds up. To reach the same level of high, or to reduce the level of withdrawal symptoms, this person might need to consume a lot more than usual, a lot more than before. Say, for example, perhaps last time a pill is enough to get this person high. But this person, over time, because of the tolerance that the body has built up, this person might need to consume more than one pill to reach the same level of high. So these are the four broad categories. And if any individuals meet 3 or more of this impairment over 12 months, that would probably qualify the person to be diagnosed with substance use disorder. But once again, I'd like to make it clear that for this diagnosis, it has to be made by a professional. So if you do find yourself or your loved one struggling with all of these factors, I would strongly like to encourage you to consider seeking professional help. Later on, Gaia will share a little bit more about where can you go for all this assistance. Why do we talk about addiction? Particularly tonight, we talk about chemical. This has been, in Singapore, quite a concerning trend for us. If we talk about prevalence-wise, just last year, 2019, among all the new drug abusers arrested in Singapore, 41% were new users. Okay, and you could actually see that just now I did make a little bit of mention. Quite a number of our proportion of drug abusers, new drug abusers, actually are our young adults, our youth and our young adults. So it actually stands at a good 62%, which is actually quite alarming for us in the social service sector, in the health sector. What about alcohol? Alcohol constantly has remained one of the most prominent mental health condition in terms of alcohol addiction, alcohol dependence. Yeah, it stands respectively at alcohol abuse at 4.1 and dependence at 0.5 at some point in their life. And once again, it appears that our young person, our youth and young people, young adults, are the people who are most vulnerable to experience such condition. That was an introduction on chemical addiction. What's chemical addiction? So just now I spoke a lot about how substance abuse is not something that we can just get rid of because one day we decide to wake up and say, you know, enough is enough. I had enough. I have seen how much impact it has brought to my family. I no longer want this life anymore. I'm done with it. I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit drugs today. Sometimes family also have expectations on their loved one to say, you know, all it takes is for you to be a bit more determined. Stay at home. Stop hanging out with your friends. Honestly, I have to say that I wish it is as straightforward as this. Unfortunately, years of research and years of study has shown us that quitting has not been as easy because substance abuse has impact on something that is very biological in us, specifically our brain. So I'm going to show you 3 very short video clips in the next few moments. I would actually show you bit by bit. Hopefully that gives you an idea how does substance abuse impact our brain function. The first stage we're going to talk about is this stage on binge and intoxication. What is it about exactly? Let's take a look at the video clip.
During the first stage, the drug targets a region of the midbrain known as the ventral tegmental area, or VTA, and causes the release of dopamine into a tiny structure known as the nucleus accumbens. Endorphins, our body's primary natural opioid, is also released. It is believed that the combined activation of both dopamine and endorphins is what underlies the sensation of pleasure following drug use. Other brain regions are also activated in the initial phases of drug use. The globus pallidus, part of the basal ganglia, is associated with the formation of habits and automatic behaviors. During this stage, drugs of abuse prompt the globus pallidus to encode drug-related behaviors as habits. The prefrontal cortex, or PFC, is a region responsible for executive functions like planning and decision-making. Normally, the PFC inhibits lower brain regions such as the nucleus accumbens. However, drugs of abuse weaken this control, thus disinhibiting the nucleus accumbens. This is thought to underlie the impulsivity that is characteristic of the binge and intoxication stage.
Okay, that's that very small video clip. I know that it has introduced a lot of brain parts, which I probably wouldn't go, and I mean, this is not a bio class, so I wouldn't go too much into describing the brain parts. But this video clip strives to help us see that when we consume things like alcohol, drugs, it makes substance, it makes a chemical, and this chemical actually has an impact on our brain. You can see that our brain, as much as it's one object, actually they are made up of different parts, and different parts plays different function. Specifically, for substance-wise, it actually it affects one of these brain parts that develops habits for us. It brings us feel-good feelings, I mentioned earlier on today. And just like if you think about it, sometimes if you have built a certain habit, like say you tend to need to say go back to my example of I need to drink coffee early in the morning. Okay, that becomes a habit that I've built over time. I don't actually consciously think about it anymore. That becomes something that I automatically do. So what happens for chemical, it has the ability to affect our brain such that our prefrontal cortex, that's the front bit of making decision, is inhibited. It no longer has as powerful a guarding function of making decision. So such habits actually starts forming. Okay. And because of the pleasure that we receive, human nature, if we experience something pleasant, the likelihood of us wanting to re-experience it, this over time also gets developed into a habit. We like what we experience from that highness, that relaxation, that pain relieving, whatever factor that could be. Even just now earlier on, I talked about one of the factor being social bonding. If I enjoy the fact that by drinking, actually, it gives me that feel-good feeling of being with my friends. All these are all part of what we call conditioning. We like the feeling, we build the habit, and our brain continues to move towards that track.
A different subset of neural structures is implicated in the second stage of the addiction cycle, the withdrawal and negative affect stage. Because drug use increases dopamine levels beyond what is normal, chronic use leads to a number of compensatory responses. The net result is that when the user is not high, the dopamine signal is actually lower than normal, leaving the user feeling awful and unhappy. The neural systems underlying this negative affective state includes a group of midbrain structures known as the extended amygdala. The activation of these systems leads to the production of stress hormones. Eventually, consuming the drug no longer produces pleasure, but instead is now used in an effort to stave off highly unpleasant psychological and physiological symptoms of withdrawal. Drug use has become a deep, compulsive need rather than a pleasurable, impulsive desire.
So at stage 1, I spoke about how because the activity is pleasurable, people start consuming all this substance to kind of enjoy it. But at stage 2, it is where people, even if they stop consuming that product for the time being, they start experiencing withdrawal syndrome. What happens for people who are in stage 2, they find that even if they want to stop, they can't just quit it because it comes with withdrawal symptoms. And in order for them to do away with all this very unpleasant, this time around it is a bit different. Instead of getting pleasure from the substance, they consume the substance in a bid to remove some of the very unpleasant withdrawal syndrome. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of this, but some of the broad categories, they'll fall under physical withdrawal symptoms and mental and emotional withdrawal symptoms. Like just now how I said, if you don't let me drink coffee, I will be irritable, I will be unable to focus. So behaviorally, sometimes you might see on drama, you might hear of stories of how people actually broke out into cold sweat, how people have headaches, how people actually feel that they are trembling. And these are all part and parcel of withdrawal symptoms. So people sometimes at stage 2, what they do is they consume in order for them not to experience one of these. So what happens next? Let's take a look at the next video.
The final stage of the addiction cycle is the anticipation and craving stage, which often marks the point whereby an individual's chronic drug use may lead to the development of a substance use disorder. While this phase is commonly represented as craving, it is important to note that craving does not by itself lead to the relapse that begins another cycle. This final stage is characterized by a complete loss of prefrontal control, as continued drug use compromises frontal lobe structures critical for evaluation, judgment, and decision-making. This stage is also characterized by altered glutamatergic signaling. Glutamate plays a critical role in memory formation and consolidation, as well as behavioral initiation. During the anticipation and craving stage, the large waves of dopamine received by the prefrontal cortex during drug use prompt the reciprocal release of glutamate in the midbrain, committing the drug and the experience to memory. As the plasticity of the brain is continuously shaped and reshaped by the drug, new paths become cemented as drug-related contextual information is stored by the hippocampus, and activation of the basolateral amygdala leads to conditioned responses to highly specific drug-related cues. In this way, chronic substance use can be thought of as a maladaptive form of learning, whereby the drug has capitalized on the plastic nature of the brain. Extended drug use leads to the exploitation and rearrangement of neural circuitry, instilling memories, habits, and goals that place greater importance on drug use than on natural rewards.
That's probably the very third stage of the cycle of substance abuse, the final stage, where you see that over time, over prolonged usage of drug, actually a lot of the brain goes through very, very significant changes, including the realteration of some of the pathway, the way that people make decisions. Previously, it was affected. Over here, you see that because of prolonged usage, it has been severely compromised. The prefrontal lobe, once again, it has a very, very strong ability. It plays a very significant role in decision-making function. And when that starts to actually be inhibited, you can see that there's a lot of short circuit, if I were to put it that way, that people do not rely on the prefrontal lobes to make certain decisions anymore. They rely on the pathway that they have created over long-term effect, that you can see that the goals that they might have as presented in the video, it starts to have less importance, because at that point in time, there are certain things that people no longer can see as the immediate need to attend to certain things as compared to long-term goals anymore. Okay, so with that, that gives you a little bit of an overview of the power of substance on our brain structure. And it does sound very gloomy if I put it that way, to say that, oh no, I mean, because someone uses substance, it looks like the brain is so badly impacted that it looks like, what else can we do? I'm going to pass the time over to Gaia, who will help us to see beyond the brain impact, what other impact does addiction has. And she's going to help to round us up today by saying, what are some of the avenues that we could actually tap on to kind of reverse some of this impact. So Gaia, off to you there.
Hi everyone. Okay, so in Yenling's part of the presentation, we looked at both the psychological and then the biological impact of drugs, all right, on a person. So the fundamental point that we, by sharing all of this, the fundamental point that we want to raise here is that, for people who probably don't really have much understanding, I think there's sometimes, they might fall into this common kind of tendency to say that, okay, as long as the person has got willpower, then can, snap out of this like habit or this addiction, okay? But it is not as easy as that. All right. It really requires a lot of effort as well. A lot of in a sense, if I really looking at what are the avenues that a person can look at, I mean, can get hold of, all right, to actually work towards their treatment. Yeah. That part was just to, to reinforce that idea that we really need to look into understanding a bit more about the impact, okay, that drug will have, or rather even like any kind of like substances would have on our brain. Yeah. Okay, so in my part of presentation, I'll be looking at the impact. Okay, hold on. Yeah. Okay, so I'll be looking into the impact of addiction. Okay, and I would like to maybe first start off with like, why is it that, as a society, especially in Singapore, why is there such a hard stance against substance abuse? All right. I like that you guys are asking questions. Keep the questions coming. Very good. Very good. Why is it that people why does Singapore in a sense take a very a hard stance against drug or even any kind of substance abuse? It's because of the cost that it actually incurs on the society itself, and the multitudes of consequences that it leads to. Okay, where there is a lot of like crime going on in the society, what that sometimes leads to is increased amount of crime rates, and of course the general disintegration of families and even on the individual as well. Okay, so for on that societal reasons, Singapore tends to take a very hard lines approach, and the infographic that you see there kind of breaks down exactly what's the cost that it actually brings upon to the economy as well. Okay, so and I suppose I will probably move on to sharing a bit more about the impact on individuals. Earlier on, we looked at exactly how does it impact the person's like neurological circuit, and I suppose I suppose along with that, the impact on individuals is that for one thing, mental health really gets affected. We saw the cartoon of like this particular individual who was very sad and depressed and all that. Yes, so one of the things that one of the impact that it actually lead to is that a person might if a person is having depression, for instance, okay, and the person is maybe is someone who is has a tendency to drink a lot of alcohol, what might that happen is that the depression might just get worse. Yeah. The other things here is that when a person takes certain kinds of substances, all right, it might just like cocaine or amphetamine. What might happen is that it might just result in the person developing psychosis as well, which is like a form of a mental health condition. Yeah. Some of this mental health condition can be a bit long lasting. Yeah. So that's one part of it. Physical health issues wise, there are a lot that that it causes. Liver damage, prolonged use of alcohol abuse actually could cause liver damages. Liver cirrhosis, for instance. Tobacco abuse would cause cancer, for instance, and I guess a whole entire like of different other types of like conditions, like physical health conditions there. Okay, and I think what I would like to so emphasize on is that after a while, okay, what might happen is that it might actually cause a person to not function very well personally, and you would see them not be able to be in a state where they can contribute meaningfully to to the community, to their loved ones, and all that. All right. So become a bit more dependent, and like what the animation actually suggested that it almost seems like the drug or the substance actually kind of like dominates their life. All right. So these are some of the impacts that it will cause on the individuals. Yeah. We thought of like touching a bit on the laws that are there in Singapore so that everyone is informed about exactly what are the different types of laws and exactly how does the Singapore laws here work, yeah, in the area of like drug consumption here. So this is something that we had researched on. Okay, and in Singapore, basically the laws on drug comes under this act called Misuse of Drug Act. Okay, and what this act is an act for the control of dangerous or otherwise harmful drugs and substances, and for the purposes connected therewith, right? And under this law, basically there are three different types of drug offenses that they look into. One which is drug possession, the second one being drug consumption, and third one being drug trafficking. Yeah, so these are the three main type of drug offenses, right, that this laws kind of cover. In a nutshell, something that we had found out in our research here is that if a person is actually suspected to be abusing drugs, all right, what we understand is that their urine, or if not their hair, might be ordered to be tested for. Okay, and if it's tested positive, the person might actually be admitted into rehabilitation center, right, to undergo treatment and rehabilitation for 6 months. And this can be extended to about 3 years, okay, at a drug rehabilitation center. And this only applies if you're arrested solely for drug consumption, okay. And I suppose if if again you have committed the offense second and third time again, then that might actually in a sense whereby it's possible for you to be tried in court and be convicted as well. So therefore, there's a possibility for the person to actually face a long-term prison sentence, right, as a result of drug consumption. Okay, so the laws are rather a bit strict towards drug consumption. Okay, and this is one of the impact that it cause on the individual. Okay, on top of the various different types of like mental health issue, physical health issue, and a general deterioration of their well-being. They might just face a possibility of getting into trouble with the law as well. Okay, and those slides that you saw were, I mean, it's just there to state exactly what is the stance that the nation takes lah, okay, on drugs. Yeah, so that's for the individual. Okay, now let's look at the family. And I suppose on the family, it's not it never is easy to be caring for someone who is was addicted to substances. All right, and in a sense whereby we see that what happens is that sometimes the addiction in a way. What happens is sometimes the addiction in a sense it can actually be picked up by their children or people who are in or otherwise other family members in a sense. Now we are not saying that genetically they become predisposed to addictive behavior. Some studies show it, but what happens is that because of their close proximity to to substances, and maybe because of the fact that they see their parents or otherwise like siblings or whoever not consuming drugs or even smoking, all right, then they might then actually model that kind of behavior, or otherwise have this impression that this is absolutely fine, there's nothing wrong in smoking, for instance, or drinking alcohol, all those sort of things. Yeah, so this is something that we see happen within families. All right, the second thing that we see commonly happen in families is domestic violence. Yeah, so when a person is addicted to substance, like what we had seen in that video is that they cannot quite process information very well. The tendency is for them to actually try to manage the withdrawal. So if you have a situation where maybe the husband wants money, all right, to drink, all right, and perhaps the wife is not quite allowing for that, all right, and this individual is really trying to is experiencing all kinds of withdrawal symptoms, really cannot tahan in that sense, right, really cannot manage, then in order for him to get that money to purchase the alcohol, he might resort to violence. All right, and so therefore that tends to be a common kind of a recurrence, right? Domestic violence in that sense, or sometimes maybe because of the fact that they are under the influence of drugs, they may not know exactly what's going on. All right, they become a bit detached from the reality, and that might just cause for them to become more violent because of the influence of drugs, and therefore just perhaps possibly hit someone or harm someone. Yeah. And the third thing here is the criminality, like I said, if sometimes in a way whereby unwittingly, if there's drugs, I suppose kept inside the house or sorts, if in case there is someone, who might have had contact with it. It might just kind of like place the family in a bit of a tricky situation with the law lah, in that sense. Okay, so therefore criminality becomes a bit of a recurring theme here within the family also. Okay, and of course after a while when family gets a bit too burdened by the issues regarding substance abuse and all that, it places a lot of stress on the family. Like I shared, in a sense whereby it is one thing, they would have to manage um, the almost the absence of an individual not being able to contribute. All right, and then on top of that, the behavior that comes with the consumption of substances. All right, it's never easy on the family for sure, and it's never easy on the individuals. All right, but it is always possible to get help, especially when you're at the earlier stages, and so that some of these impacts can be minimized. Yeah, so these are some of the impacts. So we have talked about impacts. We have a rough idea about what substances, substance abuse could do to us. So then, therefore, the question here is then how do we treat it, right? What do we then do, all right, about this, right? So usually in a medical setting, what happens here is that okay, so what happens here is that in the treatment of a person who has got substance addiction issues, all right, usually the approach of treatment tends to be very biopsychosocial. Okay, so if a person is taking a drug or even alcohol, for instance, okay, what tends to happen is that they will they would need to go through that period of detox, for instance, okay, so that the body can be rid of the drugs, for instance, can be rid of the alcohol, right, in that sense, their body. All right, and for some of them, I think what happens here, that especially for alcohol, if that it can be a bit difficult for them to manage the withdrawal. So at the point of them being admitted into a hospital, or or seeking any kind of like inpatient rehabilitation. If you're wondering exactly what is inpatient rehabilitation, I will explain on that later. But basically, it's about a stay-in type of rehabilitation. Yeah. So what happens is that sometimes the psychiatrist will look at prescribing them medications to help manage the withdrawals at the very beginning. Okay, why? Because it can be very difficult to manage some of these withdrawals effects of it. All right. So while they undergo detox, then the medication gets prescribed to them to manage the withdrawals. Okay, and then slowly, in a sense, whereby the medications will continue towards trying to manage their craving, their urges, in a sense. Okay, but biological medication alone doesn't just help. A psychological approach also is important. So then that's where you have, what helps is for counselors and psychologists to look at relapse, how to manage relapses, for instance. How can they, learn skills to cope, and perhaps look into changing behavior and developing a routine. Okay, so that, then, so that this can be managed a bit more better, all right? So once after the withdrawal symptoms and all that get settled, then it would help to have a more psychological approach towards treatment. Okay. Now, biology and psychology alone doesn't help. Sometimes it what matters is also the environment, right? Like in the sense by I once had someone say that sometimes the person can recover, but the family may not recover in that sense. All right. So which is true, because in a way whereby we also want to make sure that the family is able to manage and they know exactly how to help support a person who has got addiction issues, and support in a way that is healthy for both individuals. Okay. If a person is maybe perhaps depending on alcohol, all right, to manage depression or manage some kind of like a relationship issue, then maybe perhaps that's something that they might look into. All right, how to then work on that relationship, all right, so that the stress that's within the social, I mean the relationship doesn't become another reason for them to fall back into the addiction. Okay. Practical support groups are very important, because you always need your your cheerleaders to actually help you manage this journey. All right. So in a nutshell, basically the biopsychosocial approach is usually taken, all right, in the treatment care of a person who's going through substance use addiction. Yeah. Okay. So next up, I'll look at. Now, there are different types of treatments out there. One might ask exactly where do I go to, for instance? There are so many out there. How do I know exactly what is helpful, what is not helpful, what does it do in that sense to help me out here? Okay, so I'm going to be categorizing this, okay, into two parts. So this spells out the types of treatment options that's available in a hospital setting. Okay, so in Singapore, I suppose we have NAMS, which is what it provides is inpatient treatment. Okay, and how might it help is that for somebody who wants to go through detox, that is useful. All right, and it looks into providing a more intense pharmacological, like I said, like having a psychiatrist being around to actually look at identify any, for instance, any underlying mental health issues that can cause for this addiction to develop, all right, or any kind of and also on top of that, like basically manage all right, the addiction process. All right, so both the pharmacological approach, the psychosocial intervention in that sense. So it's a bit more intense, and usually they stay around for about 2 week period. All right, and I think it is like it gives them a cocktail of of intervention that can actually help support them. Okay, who is more suitable for it? Okay, people who maybe in a sense whereby have severe symptoms of addictions, for instance, who are chronic abusers of substance, and maybe in a sense whereby they may have like both some kind of a mental health issue and as well as an addiction issue. So in that sense, this sort of a treatment would be more suitable for them. Yeah. So the other treatment option that's available in NAMS is in NAMS is outpatient as well. Okay. So for outpatient, in the sense whereby what it provides is psychological treatment, sustained recovery type of psychological treatment, counseling as well to sustain the recovery, family support group and support group for individuals as well. Yeah, it's the same, but in the sense whereby the difference here is that the person is going to be like in a sense whereby they might just come for appointments, all right, either on a monthly basis of sorts, and then have that access to some of these treatment options lah. Okay, who might be more suitable for this treatment option would be the milder forms of addiction, meaning to say that maybe they are in the stage of recovery. Okay, they have recovered to some extent, and therefore they need that continued support, all right, in the community. So this type of treatment option would be suitable for them. Okay, and maybe perhaps some of individuals who are possibly in the early stages, maybe in a sense whereby perhaps just experimented with some kind of substance, starting to have certain symptoms in a way, all right, so then it might be a bit more suitable for them. Yeah, so that's the kind of treatment options that you see in the hospital. Now, what about the community then? Okay, so the community, we have halfway houses, all right, and usually a person who stays in a halfway house can stay around about like 6 months or longer, depending on on sometimes the conditions that they need to agree on, okay, with the halfway houses, operators and all that. Okay, so in what way does it help? Is that it is a non-hospital care that focuses a lot on psychological intervention. So they have a team of like counselors, for instance. Some of them do have religious counselors, all right, where they use religion, spirituality in a sense to actually help support them. Okay, and what some of these halfway houses do is that they actually help to provide some level of structure and routine. So usually it's a bit fixed, and they're quite strict. So if a person wants to maybe go out, to meet to for appointment and all that, they will require for individual to even to produce a time sheet kind of thing to say that at this time they weren't here, at this time they actually were well, maybe attending a appointment, so on and so forth. All right. So in the sense whereby they do a lot of monitoring, they try to deliberately put in that structure and routine so that the person is able to in the whole recovery process, okay, able to adapt to a new way of lifestyle. Okay. Some of them do connect them to employment services, all right, so that that while they are there, they could do something in that sense to actually keep them active. Yeah. So the question is that who might be a bit more suitable for this? Basically, those who might have been chronic abusers, who have been using drugs for a very long time, and maybe at that point in time do not require detox. So sometimes what happens here is that like a person might go through NAMS, right, to go through that process of detox. Okay, and the detox, how long does it take? It really depends. Some might take I guess a week or two, or some may even take longer. It really depends. Yeah. So therefore, after that whole process of going through detox, then then they might actually continue that journey, okay, of recovery by staying in some of these halfway houses. Okay. So the other option here is support groups and counseling as well. That's also available in the community. In what way does it help is that it actually helps to create a supportive environment, and also helps the individuals to cope and sustain recovery. Okay, so they focus a bit or more on like, okay, sustaining recovery, making sure that that people are going through this together with others as well. Okay. um, Perhaps those who are in the stages of recovery and in a sense by a bit more milder, right, forms of recovery, and maybe perhaps some of them who have certain emerging signs of addiction. Okay, but it's not that serious enough in a sense, but it's just starting, and they might require some level of counseling support, all right, or support groups to help them understand a bit better on how to cope. Yeah. So these are treatment options that's available both in the community and as well as the hospital. Yeah. So this is something that that we wish to just share with you a bit about, like the recovery of individuals who have actually gone through, who have been who have suffered addiction. Okay. So on the left you would see this gentleman who used to have like alcohol addiction and all that. Okay, and once after going through recovery and all this sort of things, he's a bit more better looking, pretty handsome looking. So you could see that the smile really, all right. And I suppose the lady as well, okay, who was addicted to heroin and crack. Over time, with support, all right, she was able to recover and be a lot more active, all right. So the basic point is that yes, addiction is not easy to manage addiction, but recovery is always possible, all right, and it doesn't matter which stage of recovery you are at, as long as you wish to recover from this, and all that. Definitely the support is available. So on this slide, I'm just going to go over just share a few tips for families and loved ones. Now, there would be a workshop that will be conducted subsequently, okay, that might share a bit more details on what families can do, friends can do to support a person who is struggling with addiction. But over here, I'm just going to give you very general tips, okay, for families and loved ones to understand a bit more about what can you do, okay, to support yourself and the person who's struggling. Okay. Now, what's very important, what's very crucial in this whole step is to actually educate yourself about addiction. Okay. To find out from the right sources, for instance, okay, what does addiction do to a person, understand the behavior and all that. So therefore, all of you guys are doing a right step. If you are family members or even friends, in a sense, you are doing a right step of actually tuning into our series, okay, to understand a bit better. All right. What's also important is to set rules and boundary, okay, and especially if, in a sense, if you feel that safety is of a concern, okay, like that scenario that I shared, okay, if sometimes with addiction, violence can be present as well. So therefore, it's always important, all right, to set certain rules and boundaries to make sure that everyone in the household is safe, including the person who's struggling with addiction. Yeah. Because if you are going to, in a sense, I don't know, maybe perhaps I don't know, I guess, like, to manage person's behavior, all right, like give that person some amount of money in a way, then that might actually not help the person in the long run. I know it's never easy. It's never easy. But but in the long run, it might just enable the person's tendency to then seek those substances. Okay, and it's not the person. It's really the behavior, that addiction, in that sense, that we want to address. Yeah. The third thing here is to seek professional help. Never do this alone. Never. It's never easy to talk to get help from extended family members. If you're in a situation where it's not quite easy in that sense to manage, really do seek professional help so that you can get connected to the right places for support. Yeah. Um, do not enable. Okay, abstinence is key. There are some who probably have this idea that by managing maybe my previous drug abuse, I can go into alcohol, for instance, okay, so that it kind of like manages the 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 addiction better in a sense. Sometimes that doesn't help, because then what that leads to is them developing another addiction, okay, to another substance, right? So that doesn't really help. So don't enable. Substance is very abstinence is very important. Okay, have realistic expectation. Setbacks will always happen. Okay, relapses, I mean, it happens. All right. um, have realistic expectation in a sense of by this is a process, it's a journey. Okay. uh, by lecturing them, nagging them, it's not going to be helpful for them. Okay, so then therefore show that you can direct them to the appropriate treatment. Okay, and like I said, don't do this on your own. Always have a team to support you. Okay, and the very important thing, the last thing that's very important, is really self-care. Okay, the person with addiction matters, but it's also important that you matter as well. All right, so I think we are all very familiar with with the when we take I suppose a plane and all that. Okay, even if you are seated beside a child, it's important for you to like be connected to the oxygen supply, right, before you connect that child to oxygen supply. So it's the same principle. All right, you have to take care of yourself first before you can actually take care of someone, all right, who is probably in need of care. Okay, so self-care is important. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so moving forward, I think in the sense about this are the services that are out there, okay, to help manage a person who has got addiction issues. So Averia Therapy Center, is one of the services that actually supports a person who's in recovery of addiction, and we have Alcoholics Anonymous, the different types of resources. NAMS is there, We Care, Promises Healthcare, and all that. Yeah. Sorry, just give me a moment. Okay. Um, and the other alternative is that for helplines, in that sense, okay, in a sense, right, if a person is like maybe at that point in time really going through a lot of difficulties, and you just need to speak with someone. These are the healthcare helplines that are available. Okay. The very important thing that we also wish to emphasize is that if a person has taken a lot of substance, or in a sense if I maybe consume a lot of alcohol, right, and that the person's life is in danger or something, the physical health is rather is in danger, it's important that they get medical help, medical attention first. So do bring them to the nearest hospital. Okay, call the emergency services and really bring them to the nearest hospital. Okay, so that's important. Yeah. Yeah, so these are the upcoming workshops. Like I said, some of this we might not be able to have that opportunity to go in depth. A lot needs to be shared, and therefore these are the upcoming workshops that's going to be looking into a bit more, all right, on how to manage addictive behavior in youth. That's coming up on the 9th and 11th of November. And then we have on the 23rd and 30th of November, another workshop on managing addictive behavior in adults. Okay, so this, yeah, if I suppose you're interested, I mean, there's registration details that we provided to you. Okay, and maybe perhaps Yanling, I guess, do we take in questions?
Yes, in fact, Gaia, I was actually trying to pay a lot of attention to what you are sharing, at the same time trying to respond to as many questions as I have attempt to. So, Gaya, I know we are kind of out of time. We are kind of at 9:08. So, but I do notice that we have a lot of questions in the chat box. So I was thinking maybe we could offer it to the audience tonight. We don't want to leave them stranded with all the good questions they have asked. So we are mindful that it's reached 9:08. If let's say you need to go, we would like to thank you for your time with us. We could get your help to fill up the feedback form, which actually will pop up the URL there so that we know what are of interest to you and we can carry on presenting more helpful information for you. But if you're not in a rush, I think, Gaya, I was thinking, shall we maybe just go for another 10 minutes to respond to some of the questions that we have on board?
Yes.
Okay, so brilliant questions. We have loads and loads of good questions. I think I've responded to a number, but I still have a lot not answered. So Gaya, shall we go with whatever that we have over here? Okay, maybe I will take the first question. I think that questions might be a little bit more relevant to the earlier bit, but of course, Gaya, please add in if you have any. So in terms of abusing different drugs, I think for the audience who asked this question, it is a bit difficult to answer that questions quite directly because there can be many reasons. Are they abusing different drugs because they are looking for that particular drug that fits them better? They haven't found the drug of their choice. Or is it more of like the gas that this person has, the feeling of being high? But if you think about the initial reasons that I was talking about, that is probably a reason that maybe people were pursuing in the beginning. But as time goes by, they actually build reliance on it. They build addiction upon the substance. What the family can do is really, I think, Gaya, just now you actually mentioned quite a number of avenues, how the family can do the support. And I think upcoming we also have workshop. I hope those will be helpful for this particular audience. I think it will be a difficult question to answer just by this statement itself. It could be many reasons, but what doesn't change is how can we support this person to address the initial reason why this person was on drugs. Why did this person need to rely on drugs to either get a fix or get a high?
Okay, so maybe I'll just take the second question in a sense.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So usually, how long does one take to detox? Like I said, it really depends on different individuals, and therefore it varies really. Okay. And does detox provide a higher chance of recovery in addition to psycho and social approach? Okay. And can one detox at home? Very good questions. Okay. So in a sense, by detox helps. I think that's the primary, the most important thing to do. Okay, so that the body can, in a sense, be rid of like some of this chemicals and all that. In the sense that the substance actually brings into the body lah. Right. So that's the thing. That it is important in a way. Okay. So and then from there on, I think like what I covered earlier. Usually in NAM setting, the psychiatrist would actually look at connecting them with medications to actually help manage the withdrawal in that sense while they go through the detox. Okay, so the first step is to really look at helping them to settle down and manage the withdrawal, all those sort of things. That's important. Okay, in order for the psychosocial approaches to become a bit more effective, because if they are going through a lot of withdrawals, counseling at that point in time, they may not be too responsive, okay, to it. So therefore, not the best time. Okay, and can one detox at home? It can be tricky, I think, especially if a person has got, I'm a bit more familiar with alcohol addiction. So therefore, if a person has got alcohol, in a sense, by has, drinks a lot in that sense, okay, it can be, in a sense, from what I gather is that by one of the withdrawal symptoms that can happen to them is that they might actually go into seizures, for instance. Okay, so in some cases it can actually be very lethal. So it's best to do it in an environment like a hospital environment where it's a bit more safe. Okay, for them. Yeah. So that's. I hope that answers to the question. Yeah.
Yes, Kaya, I think that is something that we really want to highlight because actually detox can be very dangerous. Like you mentioned, particularly alcohol. So we do actually want to encourage, if you do need detox support, be sure to seek out professional support. I think that would be a lot safer.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so can anyone go into halfway houses themselves, not by prison? No, actually, I think there are different types of there are a lot of different types of halfway houses. All right, there are some where where they only accept referrals from prison. And some were actually, if you, I suppose, just like approach them and and say that you want to just go through that recovery process, yeah, they are okay to actually take you in, yeah. But if I'm not wrong, I think they would probably need to do a screening first to know exactly whether have you had a recent use of substance abuse first, all right, to know, all right, how to then approach that treatment towards you. Okay, so that's something I hope addresses that question. Okay. That other question about, okay, one, would an addict be tempted when they get together in groups? Okay, many say that mix around so get tempted. It depends on what crowd you are with. If you are in that crowd that wants to focus on recovery, then yes, I think then that can be beneficial. All right. Um, because I think the thing with, maybe it is, I guess this is in response to the support group suggestion, perhaps. What helps is that, for a person with, addiction, I think, my previous clients in this sense, I think sometimes what they share is that they feel rather isolated, given that, they don't feel very understood about the issues that they're facing and all that, and that can sometimes be very difficult for them, right, to manage some of the stigma that they get subjected to. By having support groups, I think it helps them. Like I said, the key thing is about what kind of group they are part of, lah. All right. So by being in this support group that provides a kind of positive kind of like, energy and all that, that can actually help them um, to maybe help them to actually, like, manage some of these issues that they are facing, and help them with their recovery. Okay. Like I said, I mean, in a sense whereby different people may respond to different things differently. I'm not saying that confirm plus drug this will help, but yeah, it is one of the options there. Yeah.
I think Trina has helped to respond to Alan's question on addicted to medication. So maybe you could do the other bit.
Okay, so can you share a bit more about setting boundaries? What type and how, and what if the person doesn't cooperate? It's a usual concern that family does have about setting boundaries. Like I said, it's never easy. It depends on what is it okay, so it really depends on what's the issue that you wanna address. I think I'll start with that first. So if, say for instance, you experience a lot of aggression, okay, from this person because of the substance abuse, and basically if that is what it is, then it might be important to tell them that, okay, you do not want you do not stand that behavior of them becoming aggressive towards you. For instance, the person is drinking a lot of alcohol and becomes aggressive because of it, and it's important to let them know, not when they are intoxicated for sure, but when they are not, they're sober, to say that you're not I mean, you don't want for this behavior. Okay, but when you share as well, be respectful in the tone. If it becomes very naggy and it becomes very critical, I think what it might help, what it might do is that it might just make the person repulsive. Okay. So I don't think that anyone chooses to become a person with addiction by choice. But in a sense, by sometimes when these chemicals really get into the brain, it causes for them to exhibit certain behavior, right? But what fundamentally is sometimes some of the things that they might want, might still yearn for, is that love, that support, and the relationship as well. So those are things that, if you know the person is motivated by certain things, all right, then those are things that you might want to reflect on, all right, to let them know that this is something that you want for them to communicate to them, that this is something that you want for them to stop, all right, and then from there on look at what treatment can they then embark on. Okay. There can be a lot that can be covered in this. Maybe I would suggest that you tune into that workshop to look at then how to learn a bit more in detail on how to manage the behavior. Okay, so I think that would be a lot more better explained, I feel. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So can you share how a drug addict feel or think?
Kaya, I think the context of this, because I managed to take a look at the chat box,
Sure.
I think it was a question from Muhammad. It seems to come from this place where they always say they want to change, but it doesn't quite happen.
Mm.
It doesn't change. So I think that was the context that if I got Muhammad right. Yeah, what's going on over there actually?
I mean, I do recognize there's a level of frustration that that comes with not knowing exactly why is this person like going back to their addictive behavior and ways. Um, it is never easy. It really isn't
Mm.
easy. It's a journey. Um, do have realistic expectations as well, like what we had shared. There'll be times when things will be going on well, right? And then there'll be times when the person may not, and then have certain setbacks. But setbacks are setbacks. It doesn't mean that they are going to be derailed from the journey. It doesn't. It's not necessarily always the case, right? There's always a possibility for them to be in that journey of recovery. Um, so, and I suppose as a family member, as a friend, if you're finding yourself frustrated, um, learn to take care of yourself first. I think that's very
Yeah.
important. All right. Surround yourself with friends, who can help support you. And like I said, connect with professional support as well. All right. So that then it becomes like it almost takes like what they say, almost takes a village to raise a child. I would also say this in a sense of it almost takes a village in the sense to actually support a person with addiction or any other kinds of like conditions. Okay, so surround yourself with your village. Yeah.
Yeah, Gaia, in fact, I think it's important. I think this is a very, very good question. I really like this question because personally, I think I've also met clients who are frustrated with themselves, that they keep relapsing. They keep going back to the same cycle despite promising a lot of their loved one. I think maybe one thing that we would like to really introduce to the audience for tonight is it does take just now you did mention it takes kind of a multi-probe approach for treatment. It affects the biological, the brain. We need to do some rewiring, kind of create some new neural pathways through some psychotherapy. We also need to potentially rely on medication if there's a need to. We also need to rely on a lot of the psychological bit of building what brought the person to maybe try drugs in the first place. So I think it will be very frustrating for both the addict as well as the loved ones if they re-experience failure again and again. But what we hope to introduce to everyone is actually it really is, I like how you put it, Gaia. It actually really does take more than one way to help a person quit a habit. It's not something that we can switch immediately overnight. We need to look at it from multiple places, attend to it from multiple places to increase the chance. So I hope that with that, maybe we manage to give a glimpse of what we can do if we do experience this in our social circle. That definitely don't do it yourself. If you have a friend who is experiencing it, do encourage him or her to seek the professional support, because professional support systems, they are actually linked up to many different resources. They could do the multi-probe treatment plan that we're talking about, be it the rewiring of the neurons, the pathways, be it the medications, be it the counseling, be it the family therapy kind of work. They can all come together as a package. So I hope, Gaia, I hope everyone, Gaia and I hope we managed to answer most of the questions. I hope we didn't leave out any questions because there were really, really a lot of questions. But if you do have any further questions, feel free to contact us. I think Gaia dropped the contact details just now. And we will very much welcome you to give us more feedback in the feedback form. If there's anything that is helpful for you, we will look at it for the next quarter. Yeah. With that, shall we bid our audience good night, Gaia?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Yep.
Thank you very much. Stay safe.